for being here. The four of us will try and unpack where we stand on the relationship between the government and the civil society organizations, in particularly regarding the policy engagement policy. I'll come to Graham in a moment on what it's actually called. Just quickly so you know who's up here. Isaska Chandero from Rural Rise, their public relations officer. Graham Hopwood is the director of the Institute for Public Policy Research, and Anthony Mutch is the executive director of Civic 264, which is the coordination hub for civil society in Namibia. So Graham, where do we stand on the partnership between government and civil society when it comes to policy making?
Okay, well, to refer to the document you tried to name, I think the official title is GRN Civil Society Partnership and Engagement Policy. And this goes right back to 2005 when I think Helmut Angula was the Director General of the National Planning Commission, and this was first proposed possibly as a piece of legislation like an NGO law in Namibia. And since then, it's been through various iterations, various phases of consultation. I think, unfortunately, the theme throughout has been, from civil society's side, to be a little bit cautious, even defensive about the purpose of this policy, because over time, we've seen the civic space in Southern Africa and certainly in Eastern Africa being limited, civil society being constrained, and there was a fear that this policy, and possibly as a prelude to a law, might be a means of trying to control civil society, to limit civil society, to force us into prescriptive registration systems that would possibly even result in the closure of CSOs or difficulties in getting funding. I think, as has been mentioned, we haven't actually seen sight of it for more than a year now because it disappeared into the National Planning Commission and is supposedly on its way to Cabinet. But at least, as Federico said, the final draft I saw was fairly benign. Maybe we should start looking at it a bit more positively now. And I would signpost a few things that say there are, I'll maybe speak about negative things later, but just as a positive point at the moment, I would say it is worth reading NDP 6. Civic plus 264, but mainly NamNet, actually represented by Ronnie Dempers here today, did try to contribute a chapter on civil society to NDP 6 on request of the National Planning Commission. Now later on, that was quite late in the day, but it did run into some resistance. But ultimately the compromise was that there is about a page or just over a page on civil society in NDP 6, and it does recognise civil society, I wrote a few things down here, as a key driver of national progress. It gives a brief synopsis of the history. It mentions NamNet by name, it mentions Civic plus 264 by name in terms of being information and coordinating bodies. And what is interesting to me in view of Federico's presentation is that it specifically mentions something called the SPCG. Has anybody ever heard of that? It stands for Standardized Public Consultation Guidelines. And that's one of the targets in NDP 6, to have these set up and established by 2030. I think, obviously, we don't have to really wait 5 years. We should hopefully try to get the government to the NPC to expedite this, but this is a means of setting up a formal way of having consultations. And it also talks about social contracting, which we're familiar with that term in the sense of some health service provisions, but it talks about expanding the social contracting concept. So there's plenty actually positive stuff there that civil society can explore and utilise. I think there's a counterbalancing context in Namibia to do with some, misunderstandings and negativity towards civil society, but I think I'll just stop at that point. And then,
I just quickly have one more question, because if you describe it as such, the policy and also what's in the National Development Plan 6, NDP 6, paints a picture of government and civil society both wanting to have a more constructive dialogue to formulate better public policy to solve problems that Namibia has. However, there's always a little bit of a, and you hinted to that, we've seen that in Zimbabwe in particular lately, kind of government trying to control civil society as a challenge to their, let's say, power. And you hinted that is a bit of the fear that you had looking at this law as well, that it might restrict the possibilities of civil society to receive international funding or to operate as freely, to publish freely, to do research freely, etc. Or to be governed freely as we have at the moment. Most civil society organizations are either Section 21 or trusts that have boards, and we've seen how that in some cases can lead to civil society organizations being controlled by government agencies or being shut down because they do not comply with certain legislations regarding the incorporation of the organizations. But as far as I understand you, at the moment at least, both the policy as well as the perspective going forward in NDP 6 are looking at government and civil society agreeing on we need to have a constructive relationship to formulate policy. Now my question, sorry. Can you briefly give us your perspective or your definition of what the role of civil society organizations in a democracy is? Because for government, for parliament, etc., it's clear they're elected, they have a democratic mandate. But Federico also hinted at meaningful dialogue means you engage stakeholders, civil society organizations being one of those, in formulating policy. So what, to have a clear understanding, is the role of civil society when it comes to policy formulation?
So the problem so far is that it's been very haphazard in terms of consultation. So sometimes you do get a ministry taking it seriously. I can give one example where things have developed quite positively, and that has been with the Ministry of Finance when Ipumbushimi was the minister, where we were able to organize civil society consultations with him. He advised us on when to do this so that we could have maximum influence on the budget, and there were some signs that we were having some effect. So that the key to that was open, frank discussions in public with the key players and the senior officials and the minister, but also continued engagement and follow-up. So what often happens is that you might have a useful consultation meeting, but you never hear any feedback, you don't get anything back. So it's partly government not giving feedback, but it's also the fact that civil society also tends to drop the ball sometimes.
But what would you say is the role of civil society in this policy consultation?
So civil society, I think, there's no... Civil society is a very broad definition, so we can all bring concerns from our particular areas. If you're a gender organisation or women's organisation, you'll have particular issues. Early childhood development, particular issues. Governance, which is what we tend to focus on, also a set of issues. But so we need to bring clear positions, do our research, that's part of our job, and position ourselves very clearly so that we come with strong arguments. And we also need to be aware of what the history and the context, so it's a lot of work actually, and what the law or the policy in its draft form says, and we need to be able to not just make issues slogans or platitudes, but to actually really engage with the policy and the legislation that's been talked about and suggest very serious additions or amendments or changes or fundamental issues if we disagree with it on a fundamental sense.
But that would mean that civil society's role in these policy consultations is to bring in particular perspectives, let's say in your case expert perspectives based on research, etc., maybe even coming from a human rights perspective and saying when we look at, I don't know, the budgeting for the development of Namibia, certain issues should have a priority from an expert point of view. Or if you are an organization that works on GBV, like Step Up Arc, you would give the input that there needs to be sufficient funding, for example, for safe houses for women in situations of domestic violence. So you bring in, you represent certain interests of the communities or an expert perspective that tries to improve public policy making. Is that
so I think it's not really applicable in IPPR's case because we're a think tank, but there's plenty of civil society organisations, community-based groups that are coming from the grassroots and coming from outside Windhoek who can give an important perspective. I mean, Rural Rise, one example. So, that's one important element of these consultations is to get grassroots voices coming through and being, in a way, the civil society provides a platform for those voices to come through. That's what we tried to do with the budget consultations. It wasn't about IPPR's views, it was bringing together a whole range of different organisations, some of them quite formalised NGOs and others more community-based grassroots organisations, but bringing them together to put a whole range of positions on issues that affect the budget. So, yeah, it's basically, I suppose, fundamentally, it's a democratic process. And since we are a democracy, we should utilise this as fully as we can.
Okay. Now, Anthony, you coordinate civil society organizations, and you've also had a look at the. Sorry, Graham, I still haven't remembered the name of the policy. So I'll refer to it as
Partnership and Engagement.
The GRN Civil Society Partnership Engagement Policy. Okay. So what's in it?
Well, I think that we've had some speakers summarizing it quite well, and I'm not going to do much better than that because I think we heard a lot about transparency and accountability being repeated, which is, again, a lovely noise to hear. That's what we want. We hear things also in answer to your previous question, such as leveraging CSO expertise. So CSOs do bring to the table an element of innovation and extensive networks that can assist government in eliciting buy-in for their priorities and get the job done, assist in getting the job done. And that's actually mentioned, which is encouraging. Inclusive participation mentioned over and over again, and we heard earlier how inclusive can be broadly interpreted and how we want to see more actual participatory engagement from the beginning. From concept, not just after the first draft has been formed. So it was also formed through lots of consultations. That being said, there was a 2-day workshop at the end that was a validation workshop in which I think there were 80 participants. But briefly, the document has a policy part, 3 big parts, the policy part, a budget part, and a 3-year plan. And as we know, we're on year 2 as we speak, so hopefully that will be adjusted. There's also, encouragingly, an M&E component and a communication strategy component, and I feel that that's so important because, this has also been mentioned today, oftentimes that communication can be one way, and when communication is one way with government, it loses trust and buy-in. And so when it's more participatory through perhaps, hopefully, a dedicated communication strategy, that can really elicit meaningful participation. So that would be a quick summary from my end. It does also, as Graham mentioned, acknowledge the role of Civic 264, which through the fact that it already has hundreds of CSOs registered, is a way of kind of bridging these communication goals that it articulates, and so that's also very encouraging. I'll keep it there.
Thank you very much. So it is about improving the dialogue between government and civil society when it comes to all sorts of policies, from, I don't know, mining policies to gender-based violence policies to budgeting, etc. So Isaska, rural communities face particular struggles when it comes to having their voices heard. How do you think young people, or people in general, from beyond Windhoek can get a stronger voice?
Yeah, thank you so much. So what we need to understand is that the actual struggles of the young people, that if you want to find out what young people are going through, that can only be achieved once you access these rural communities and hear these stories firsthand from these young people. So what we do at Rural Rise is, number one, we go out into the rural communities. We facilitate dialogues. We facilitate particularly community dialogues where we create a platform for these young people to air their concerns, air their struggles and things like that. So what we did through the New Voices, New Narrative initiative is we went as far as to create what we call the Rural Youth Networks, a structure that is set up in the rural communities, a structure that we then push to integrate into the decision-making platforms of governance that exist within their areas or where they stay. For example, your constituencies, your traditional authorities. Because it is very important that we create a platform to hear what these young people are going through. So that is what we are doing as Rural Rise.
And do you think that the government should do something similar? Should they go to the communities? How would that work?
Definitely. You know, what we have realized, especially in the rural communities, is there still exists what we call the ethnocentric approach towards decision making, particularly in your rural communities. Young people do not get the seat around the table. They don't get to share. It's like they are consulted, just like earlier when Mr. Frederico was talking. It's like they are part of a conversation, but they are not part of the actual decision-making platform in the rural communities. And that became more visible when we went out to these communities. At times there is a lot of tension, a lot of battles between traditional authorities and the young people, particularly in the rural communities. And this also leaves the young people left out, and they are not part of the actual conversations that they are supposed to be part of. And these are actual decisions that have a direct impact on these young people. So what we are saying is we need to bring these young people into the room. We need to make them be part of these conversations, and not just a part of the conversation, but to see the conversation through. That's what we are pushing for as Rural Rise. So we strongly advocate that the government should go down. They should not just stop in the urban areas when they go out. Because just like Mr. Frederico said, what we have is when our government goes out to the regions, what they do is they go out to the central or the chief town of the region, but not actually to the rural communities. And it is very important for us also as civil society organizations that are based in Windhoek to branch out. Because what you have also is, you have a lot of civil society organizations that do not branch out to the grassroots levels. So what are you actually representing if you do not have people at the grassroots levels? Because you need to understand the struggles of these young people and the struggles of the general public at the grassroots for you to adequately represent them at the national level. So if we also need to have that branch out approach as civil society organizations, and we do take it very serious.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ethne, if I look at civil society on the one hand, grassroots level, national NGOs, for lack of a better word, in Windhoek mainly, regional organizations and networks, a whole range of topics on the one hand, a diverse, beautiful panorama of organizations. And then on the other hand, you have a government that is equally diverse. You have a series of ministries, a series of agencies that play a role in this. You have the National Planning Commission on the government side to kind of trying to coordinate the policy making. But it still is a very complex network of people and institutions on the government side, as well as on the civil society side. So what can we do to improve communication between these two ecosystems, for lack of a better word, and also maybe to improve transparency in the policy making?
The challenges are many and the need is big. You said something earlier about competition, and maybe I can just briefly mention that. I think it was about a month ago that a speaker of the Namibian government said that CSOs do not have a democratic mandate. And I think maybe a positive starting point for answering that question is to dispel this idea of CSOs and government as competition. Because in many ways, the stronger both are, the more we can work towards the same aims. For example, there are increasingly international monitors, such as Transparency International, ranks Namibia, I think, 59th out of 180 countries. And Namibia has recently been downgraded to narrowed in terms of international monitors that rank our transparency. And I think this is where the work of people in the room, Zoe and Graham, is so integral with access to information. You know, you can't have a strong partnership without strong communication, and I think that starts with the work that's being done to promote access to information. These are legal frameworks that need to be used properly for it to be effective. So when we strictly enforce this type of openness and expect that there be reports on exactly how budgets have been spent, and that these are regularly published, I think, you know, especially in terms of procurement information, that's the beginning. But also, I think we need to acknowledge the challenges faced by both of those parties, if I can put those diverse groups you mentioned into, broadly speaking, two camps. And funds and capacity is something experienced by both sides. You know, we have the liaison officer at the NPC at the moment, and that's a step in the right direction. But funding is tight for government as well. We've got, I think, a 13% debt servicing budget annually. So the ideal would really be to have a liaison desk at each ministry, you know, an allocated, dedicated budget at each ministry, so that these disparate and siloed policies for each ministry to deal with their own sector can be coordinated through something like the NPC.
And these liaison officers would then reach out to all sorts of stakeholders, to civil society, to maybe businesses that operate in that
Absolutely.
environment, and other state institutions as well.
Absolutely, because, you know, historically communication has been infrequent and siloed, and if there could be some coordination, that would greatly help things along. But what was the other thing that what you were saying was reminding me of?
Basically, having a number I can call.
Yes.
To say, you know, I want to talk about this.
Yes.
That would, from your point of view, be crucial now to improve the dialogue.
And yeah, absolutely, and I think we need to emphasize the overlap in aims between those two groups, broadly speaking, and that is that, you know, there are beautiful things, like Graham said. We speak about CSOs as a key driver of national progress in the policy document. But that is if CSOs are allowed to do their job of increasing transparency, increasing communication. These words are used in these documents, but when we see that in practice, it actually bolsters the buy-in, peace and stability that governments is also looking for. So if we emphasize that overlap, I think we're heading in a good direction.
Just to say, there is an overlap here with the access to information law as well, so there has to be an access to information officer in all the government ministries, offices and agencies according to that law. And that could be an access point that could be used by civil society as well as ordinary citizens to get information, but also to, you know, as just a contact point as well. So it doesn't mean the government has to spend a lot of money appointing new people. It's just a way of reorganising so that they are more open and accountable.
And Graham, you work on evidence-based policy a lot, so a lot of your studies try and look at, okay, what is the policy proposal and what do we scientifically and through our research know about the issue. Do you see that beyond a more consultative process, we might also get a more evidence-based approach to policy making through this?
In theory,
policy?
Yes. I think one of the things I'm sensing at the moment with this government is there is a sense of urgency, and obviously the socio-economic problems that Namibia faces would require a sense of urgency. But in a political sense, there's also a little bit of sense of desperation. This is a ruling party that might be running out of time if you look at the trajectory of its election results. and therefore maybe rushing to decisions, rushing, for example, to change procurement into much more direct procurement, which we've advised against because it has corruption risks. Reorganising the ministries in a way that, for example, the Minister of Urban and Rural Development can interfere in all kinds of ways with the local authorities, which may be motivated well, but actually contradicts the policy of decentralisation. So my worry at the moment is that while we might in theory have a good, if they come up with it, standardised public consultation guidelines, that the government will still be tempted to rush into decisions without doing any consultation, because they want to do things that look popular. It's the populist argument, that they need to recapture some of the vote if they want to stay in government, and therefore they move too quickly without consultation. This is something we're going to have to be very conscious of as we move forward, and we need to be proactive to make sure we are saying, no, we need to be consulted. You've written it in the in NDP 6, it's in the partnership policy, it's even in the Constitution under the principles of state policy. The principles of state policy, I'll just read it out. Chapter 11, 95K. This isn't often quoted, but it says one of the principles of state policy will be the encouragement of the mass of the population through education and other activities and through their organisations to influence government policy by debating its decisions. So we can always go back to that as well, to remind the government, you may be feeling a sense of urgency, but you've still got to get it right and to make it effective. You've still got to consult broadly, including civil society.
Thank you very much. I also didn't know about that part in the Constitution. So, Isaska, how do we actually make sure that the participatory mechanisms that government is foreseeing and that also civil society wants to support reach everyone, young and old, urban and rural?
Yeah. So what we need to do from a CSO perspective is, number one, we need to better coordinate. Like I said previously, we need to branch out as CSOs. Remember, as CSOs, we represent the interest of our people. That is, every time we get a platform, we advocate for what we are in line for, what we are created for. That is the foundation or the fundamental reason why we are CSO. So how do we make sure that people participate? Number one, when there is a consultation that is taking place, it is important for us, once we are organized, we coordinate and we inform our people to say there is a platform that we need to come air. Because if we as CSOs, we are not organized and we are not better coordinated, how do we then bring our arguments, our advocacy into the room and to fight for what we are standing for? So I think the first thing that we need to do as CSOs, we need to better coordinate ourselves and better organize ourselves. And we need to branch out to the grassroots levels. That's number one and very important that we need to do.
Thank you very much. So, Ethne, taking the buzzword of coordination, the policy also foresees that there should be MOUs, Memoranda of Understanding, coordination desks or liaison offices in the ministries. What do you see as the main challenges for the civil society side on the one side, and for government on the other side?
I'm afraid this might be a little bit of a repetition of my previous answer. I think it's capacity and budget again, which is something that is faced by both sides. So I think it's a matter of emphasizing the overlap again, in that there is a real common goal if we can elicit greater trust and greater buy-in through greater participation. And I think this maybe isn't emphasized enough, that it is in government's interest to involve civil society as much as possible. It's not a matter of competition, but of complementing each other. The more that there is participation elicited, the more that we don't take fast-tracked routes, but the slow way of actually involving people, the greater that we elicit buy-in and support, and that gives government, perhaps, hopefully for themselves, if they have this buy-in, the stability that they are looking for to turn around the trajectory we're seeing in the election results. I hope that kind of answers your question.
I understand the challenge on the government side, but what do you say on the civil society side?
Well,
where will we struggle?
Yeah, so I mean, perhaps that struggle is so familiar for me that it doesn't bear answering. You know, our funding has been greatly curbed of late, as we're all very aware of, and it has always been fluctuating to begin with. There have been many conversations around capacity of late. I think just that coordinating and getting involved and working together and collaborating, which is what I'm so excited for my very new role at Civic 264 to build on the hard work that has already been done. Because it is a way for civil society to contact one another, to boost one another, for their voices to be amplified, for their work to be amplified. And so that type of staying strong, because I think it's more important now than ever for our democratic space to be expanded. For democracy itself depends on a strong civil society. And so I think our challenge will be really eliciting government participation, political will to just be involved and engaged, to trust us as people who will be fighting for accountability and transparency, but that is in the common good.
Just quickly, Isaska, are you registered with Civic 264? Okay.
Both of us
after the panel discussion,
we will come back to that.
Graham, so Federico emphasized meaningful engagement as not being just I'm talking, you're listening, you signed the sheet, so here we go. You've kind of underwritten my policy. What do you think MPs, government organizations, policymakers need to do to get meaningful engagement? And what does civil society have to do?
Okay, so when we're talking a lot about government, we should also remember Parliament as well and the MPs. So that's certainly one forum where there could be meaningful engagement. If we can particularly link up with the various committees and their particular briefs and mandates, because I think that's one way for us to educate the MPs. And unfortunately, even through this project, I don't think there's been enough engagement with elected representatives, and we definitely need to do that. So we have to use the forums that are there. In terms of meaningful engagements, what I referred to before, what tends to happen, and we're guilty of this as well, is that you get an invitation very late, maybe 1 or 2 days before the actual meeting or workshop. You don't have time to fully research the issue. Often the government doesn't even send out the detailed policy document or legislation that it wants to discuss. So you don't actually know about it until you arrive at the workshop. So we need to get all these ways of doing things correct, so that the civil society can be prepared. So the key part of meaningful engagement is to be prepared, particularly from civil society's side, and then also to coordinate when necessary. So not all go in as single voices, but when it is an issue like access to information, we had 5, 6, 7 active civil society groups working together, coordinating things together. So that makes your input more powerful and more likely to be taken notice of. So preparation, coordination, I would say, and then some kind of persistence, not to let it go once the meeting's over, but to keep going back to the government stakeholder and saying, look, what's happening now? Will you show us a final draft? Can we have a final validation workshop? When is the process going to Cabinet or going to Parliament? We tried to do this a little bit with the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. We in IPPR, but also others, pushed for this over 2 years, and we did eventually get it in a submission to Cabinet, although that wasn't publicised. But then the Cabinet, for reasons we don't really know, partially rejected it, it seems. It's maybe not completely dead as an issue, but it was very hard to track what was going on. So being persistent and using the access to information law maybe not legally, but in the spirit of the law, to say, look, according to this law, if you're acting in its spirit, you're supposed to be proactive. The key part of the access to information law is that government information, a lot of government documents, licenses, contracts, etc., should be released proactively. We don't need to go and ask for them. It's government's responsibility to make them available. So we're going to have to get ourselves ready for this sea change that's coming in access to information, so that we can utilize the law, as I say, not always by actually bringing a case as such, but just reminding government of its responsibilities under the law. So yeah, there's using all those opportunities is crucial to meaningful engagement.
Okay. Isaska, what is on your wish list from policymakers? What should an MP do in order to meaningfully engage rural youth?
Okay, so what should an MP do to meaningfully engage the rural communities? So for us, number one is, at the moment, what we want and what we are advocating for at the moment is that we get these young people active on, because what you find at local governance structures is that the young people are not represented. So ours first with the government is, let's bring young people into those committees, because you find a lot of committees that are supposed to be active but that are not active, number one. Number two, you find that these committees do not have youth representation. So we want young people on those committees. That's what we want. Number two, then it's easy. Number three, then it's easier even when we say, do we want MPs to listen to us? Do we want ministers to listen to us? Then it's easy because we have young people in these committees. For example, you have the CDC committees and a lot of other committees. So if you have these committees, CDC, the Constituency Development Committee, for example. So if you have that, for example, if we start with that type of a committee, if we have young people represented on such a committee, then it's easy for a minister then to listen to this young person, because it is hard to listen to someone in the individual capacity, but it is easier to listen to someone that is serving on a committee. That's why we are strongly advocating, we are saying, let the young people be on these committees from their respective areas, so that it's easier for them to have the ear of the ministers. So that is our greatest wish as rural rights at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll take this opportunity to ask whether there are any questions in the audience, and I see Martin has one, and there.
There's a question.
John, do you also have a question?
No, behind John. Cool.
There's two. Let's start at the back.
Yeah.
And there's another one over there. If you have someone specific to address the question to, then let us know.
Good morning. I'm Vedapungu Amunyada from the NASTA LGBTQ+ Society. I just wanted to touch on the issue of policy formulation, and maybe I can direct my question to Mr. Graham, if I get it right. What do you think should be done to fasten the process of policy formulation? As we have seen, we have so many drafts, even if you go to the Namibia Planning Commission website, so many drafts of policies that are not implemented yet. So what do we need to do to fasten that process, and where does the responsibility lie? Does it lie with us, civil society organization, to fasten that process after we have been consulted upon already, or do we need to keep these sort of government accountable to push them to implement these policies? And I also wanted to touch on the issue of young people getting positions of power, Mr. Isaska. I just wanted to find out, we have seen that government uses that against us. You know, they put one or two young people in positions of power, but then they also then restrict them from advocating for youth empowerment. What should then be done for these young people after being given the power, after given the positions? What should they then be advised to do in order to keep on advocating for youth empowerment in such spaces? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Maybe there was a question in the back there as well, but Graham, do you want to quickly answer?
Yes, I can do. We have to ask, why are these policies just lying there and not being implemented? Why is that the case? And I think it's fundamentally, the government at some point feels it should have a policy on this issue, or should have a law, but actually at the end of the day it lacks the political will to make it happen. I can give a very concrete example of the whistleblower protection law, which there were consultations about. I know IPPR and AC were involved in consultations going back to 2015. We even intervened when it was in Parliament to try and get some of the clauses changed and improved. And to be fair, the Minister of Justice at the time and the Attorney General, one of them was Saki Shangala, actually listened to us and did change some of the parts of it. But at the end of the day, in 2017, it went through, it was signed into law by President Gaingom, and now it's been sitting there. Where are we now? That's 8 years on. And so, you know, it became clear to me, and people said to me, they don't want this law because they don't want whistleblowers like Johannes Stephenson in Fishrock coming out all over the place and telling the public what's been happening, and they don't want us, therefore, those people to be protected. And I'm afraid it has, in my mind anyway, at least come down to that issue that there just is too much to cover up, and therefore they have a lack of political will. Now the new president's very strong anti-corruption rhetoric gives me a little bit of hope that we might be able to change that. But so the thing is then, you know, you have to basically continue your advocacy work. You have to intensify it. You have to be strategic about it. We've tried to keep it in the public domain as much as possible. Every year we try to go, when the budget comes out, we say, why is there no item in the Ministry of Justice's budget to say about the implementation of the Whistleblower Protection Act? We also asked about the witness protection law, and that did finally start to get some budget and has started to be implemented. So there's been a little bit of progress. So again, it's just, what's the word? Almost stubbornness, just persistence, just to keep on these issues, because in Namibia, we just know the delays are there. It was the same in the access to information law. We're still waiting for implementation there as well. So, yeah, I think it's often a lack of political will, which we can challenge and we can address. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So what should we do for the young people after they take up positions of leadership of power? So number one, it is very important that we take note that we must be intentional as young people in our areas to bring development and change. So as such, it's of utmost importance that we give the young people the platform. Number two, the challenge that we're having is there are those young people that do not have the necessary capacity once they enter office or once they get on the platform. And that is something we cannot argue against. However, that does not mean that there are young people that do not have the necessary capacity. Young people have went through different and various structures. Young people have attended trainings. Young people have attended workshops. So there are young people that possess the necessary capacity to bring about change in their areas. So therefore, you cannot deny such young people. And if a young person stands up today and is forming part of a CDC, for example, in his constituency, give the young people the necessary capacity workshop so that the person can be in the position. But you cannot deny young people based on what happened previously and say they are not ready to take up space and to be in these platforms. Because if there is a lag, give the people the necessary training. But that should not mean that young people are not ready entirely. We just need the... And matter of fact, to our surprise, even our adults that are in these spaces, they get training. They get the necessary workshops. So what then brings about that denial for us to get the necessary workshops? Let us enter the spaces, just give us the workshops, we will take up and we will lead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Dion Besago from the National Federation of Persons of Disabilities in Namibia. I have to commend the flyers. Very good. For our members who cannot see clearly, you printed out the bigger one. It's commendable. It's very good. Step in the right direction. Master Isaskar is talking about representation on the CDC, Community Development Committee, which is a voluntarily committee. And our youth must be encouraged to do work voluntarily. Because to be idle somewhere does not help us anymore. Volunteer and be capacitated through those trainings and workshops. will make you to be noticed. Like some of us, we volunteered at this NFPDN, and we are here giving voices where they made us. But the funding is subsidized through the Ministry of Health and Social Services. But since we cannot give them audited reports, we are lacking the funding. Now we are wondering, you did not give the subsidy, what audit report are you expecting from us? Those are some of the things that we have to iron out of them. The media, I don't know which house is representing us today, but we are very happy with the Namibian newspaper, who is now currently seen as the enemy of the state. But we are happy to have a media like that, that is taking the news as it is. When it comes to our NGOs, we call them in and they investigate and they report an action. We can see results out of those reports. If the implementation is so difficult, I'm now worried. What will happen with the monitoring and evaluation of these policies that we are advocating for? Like we are sitting with the Namibian mental health bill, which just needs a signature and to be enacted, to be an act of parliament. Since 2018, we are sitting with this bill. So the implementation is, Master Frederico was highlighting, is the consultations. You will only be informed a day or 3 before. You are already there signing. No clue what is discussed. And it is the delays based on that. It comes from there. You come already with the plan, you come with the policy, you come with everything. You only want the signatures and say, it's the group photo, the people were there consulted. We don't want that way anymore. We want to be involved from the start. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Martin, I think, next, and then John, and then gentleman out there.
Yeah, I'd always been fascinated by the concept of rural rice. My question to rural rice was that actually how you collaborate, because usually what we find in Namibia is that the National Youth Council, most of the youth organizations are registered with it, and I understand they get some support, some sort of support in terms of training and etc. So I just wanted to know how your relationship is with the National Youth Council. That's the first one. Secondly, on the question that was raised to Civic 264, I just wanted to make a comment because during our consultations and community dialogues on the endangered languages, we had engagements with the Ministry of Education. And the Ministry of Education, we went to an extent of agreeing that we have to formalize the relationship with our NGO and the ministry. And we drafted a memorandum of agreement or understanding, whatever you would like to call it. And this memorandum of understanding is forever lying with the government legal drafters. I don't know whether they are understaffed, or maybe they will have an answer for it. They are here in front.
Just maybe the colleagues, because they're sitting right next to you. From my understanding, that is 2 different institutions. Memorandums of understandings go to the Attorney General, if I'm not mistaken, and you are sitting in the Ministry of Justice, drafting law. So that is 2 different entities. Just to keep that.
So it's since October last year that we have came to this agreement, because our cycle ended around April 30th, but we are engaged with the ministry so that we must at least have a semi-autonomous organization and also partly get funded by the government as well as source for funding for this kind of institution. So that's one of the challenges that we have. Maybe if anybody in the room has a suggestion how, for example, what other alternative we can follow to have this relationship formalized, because it takes quite a while. It's October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July. Long year. Thank you.
Zaska. Thank you so much. So how do we collaborate with the National Youth Council? So when we did our community dialogues last year, when we went out to the rural communities, we did acknowledge that there is a youth structure in the constituencies of all constituencies, all 121 constituencies, that there is a constituency youth forum that is affiliated with the National Youth Council. So what we did is we invited them also to be part of our community dialogues, number one. They were part of the dialogues. We invited from the regional structure to the constituency structure. So how are we affiliated? That's the other question. So at the moment, we are not affiliated with the National Youth Council. But what we do is we partner and collaborate with them when we have initiatives and programs. So that's what we do. We invite them to our sessions, especially when we work in the rural communities. We acknowledge that there is a structure that already exists. Also, when we set up our rural youth network, we introduce it to the existing structure of the National Youth Council so that they can collaborate and work together. Yeah, that's what we do at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I think John. I realize I'm making the microphone go left, right, but
my question was direct to Mr. Saskar. In terms of our representation, are there like regional representations, or is it just localized in Windhoek? Because I mean, I haven't heard of like a community in terms of like a Hardtap or Rehoboth in terms, or even in Kavango East as well. So it's just localized here, and how do people have access to it in terms of like youth? Because, I mean, in order for people to know that, no, there is a community that represents
You're referring to Rural Rise?
Yes, Rural Rise, please.
And the microphone can already try over there while you can respond.
Sure. Okay, so at the moment we launched in the Erongo region last year. So we are very visible in the Erongo region at the moment. Our structures are very active in the Erongo region at the moment. However, we have started to recruit and to expand into the other regions at the moment. So very soon you will hear us also in the other spaces. How do you connect with Rural Rise? You connect with us through our social media platforms, on all our social media handles. You can find us on IG, Instagram. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us, on those platforms. Also, you can find us on our website. We have a website where you can also see the work that we have done. All these things that we are talking about here, you can see our work that we have done. www.ruralrise.yeah. Just search Rural Rise Namibia. You will find us. Yes, just find us on social media. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Marco Robinson, member of the Namibian Mental Health Association, as well as a human rights defender. Okay, I've noticed that within all these workshops, conferences, and so forth, policies mostly just cater to young people, 18 to 35. And life does not end at 35. It's a reality, it's the truth. And you know, when it comes to access to information, my question is actually to prevent people from being excluded is, where do you access it, when do you access it, how do you access it, and who do you go to? Because as much as we talk about capacity building and resources, who do you go to? Where do you go? You know, because for example, as much as we also come together as CSOs within these spaces, there needs to be a genuine networking that has to take place. Not just that, mental health, and then next person just runs off with the topic, or, you know, enriches themselves with mental health, but they don't really consider people who actually have mental illnesses. And then also, I've noticed that when it comes to policies, when it comes within countries, the United Nations sets a standard. The countries basically adopt it. So if we want to effect change within our legislation, we need to look at United Nations level because, for example, persons with disabilities, LGBTI and so forth, it's at United Nations level. If they're not doing anything or enforcing things, then states won't really necessarily enforce it as well. So one needs to look at that. And then also, I like the word coordination and the branching out of CSOs, but there needs to be a genuine branching out, as well as a benchmarking, so that everybody can actually have an equitable, just access to the resources and capacities. And then also lastly, with regards to age, I really feel that once you hit 35 in Namibia, there's a new national youth policy, fund or grant that came out. What about the people that turn 36, turn 36 this year, who are actually being left out, because that fund wasn't available last year?
Yeah.
These are things that needs to be considered as well. What about people that have lost their employment? Also, a plea also to look into policies for aviation. Most corporate companies don't list their code of conduct or ethics on their website, on their corporate governance sites within Namibia. That's the trend within Namibia if you really look at it. The human rights policies, etc. Look at successful companies. Everything is basically posted there under corporate governance. And within Namibia, it's not something that really happens. And there needs to be more action. Instead of just coming together and just getting voices and, there needs to be action. Thank you.
Do you have a specific question to any one of the panelists, or did you just want...
I wanted to interject that, yeah. And then maybe if they have an answer or a response to that, then it's more than welcome.
Anyone has an answer? Otherwise, I would go over to Ronnie, also looking at the time, because I'm eating the time you have for your lunch break, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't really have a particular question for the panelists, but of course they can respond to my observations and comments. I'm glad to note that, that civil society has also evolved in its engagement with government and how we respond. And I'm glad to know that if I look at the situation in 2005 when the government civic partnership policy was formulated, the level of engagement, I know that when, based on that policy, government passed the NGO registration bill in 2008, NGOs or civil society was united to reject that bill. So there was quite a strong resistance. From 2008 to 2010, there was sort of silence also from government side. As Graham has noted. 15 years later, I think I'm really sharing that cautious optimism that has been expressed by the panelists, by the speakers. And I think for us to engage with that cautious optimism, I think there are instruments that are on the table now. The NDB6 and also this proposed civil society partnership engagement policy. I feel are instruments that we can use for the advancement of civil society. And rather than sit and wait about what government will do about some of the provisions in this policy, my suggestion would be, let us be proactive as civil society. Where we see good things are being proposed, let's take the opportunity to, if it's a document that needs to be developed, let's attempt to develop that policy and share it with government to say, what do you think of this? Because sometimes people may propose things, like in this NDP6, that consultative policy, how to consult around policies. I'm sure civil society can come forward with a document and present it to NBC and say, can we use this document to discuss around what can inform such kind of a document? So I'm really suggesting that let us be proactive as civil society, making use of these documents or proposals that are in these documents. For example, the framework of engagement is proposing a civil society trust fund. Yes, I share with the budget limitations and those things, but maybe just showcasing how government and civil society, how government already supports some civil society organizations. Just showcasing that. You understand? Maybe a demonstration to government to say, well, there is room for improvement. We are hearing that they are supporting the National Federation with people of disabilities. Yes, there have been challenges that have been confronted in that kind of a support. But showcasing that and showing how we can help government to move around that. So, and also, you know, showcasing, I share with you about the competition that government sometimes see us as competing or don't trust us as genuine partners. But I think there are a number of case studies that we can document and demonstrate that shows that where government, civil society, and private sector work together, we stand a better chance to achieve good results. And by showcasing those examples, I think we will hopefully demystify, you know, this suspicion and that. I remember the last push about including that chapter for civil society in NDP 6. There were pros and cons, but we said, let us push for that. And the Director General said that, well, you know, civil society is being funded by foreign donors, and we don't trust you. It was an explicit statement that was made. Whose agendas are you promoting? And we said, well, we are genuine civil society partners. If government can support its own civil society, we have seen the nations that are developed today are because they have invested in their own civil society. They see civil society as an asset. By investing in it, they can better develop. So I think showcasing positive examples where government and civil society particularly work together and where we can showcase that we achieve better results is good. Having said that, I think we should always accept that given our role as civil society and government, there will always be those healthy tensions. And sometimes that healthy tension is needed for a democratic society. And we shouldn't worry so much about, yes, there are tensions, yes, there are this and that. As much as possible, civil society to be clear about the agendas that we are pushing. Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to take those as final words. Do you still want to?
I want to do a quick piggyback.
Sure. Then.
Thank you. I promise I won't take a lot of your time. I want to do a quick piggyback. Part of what the gentleman earlier talked about was something that I noticed earlier as well, and it's a PR problem. The PR problem being that members of the public, me even, I don't know who all the civil society organizations are. Where do I find that information? I don't know which civil society organizations deal with the issues that I connect with, that I feel needs lifting up. Where do I find that information? Thirdly, it's a PR problem in the sense of documents go to government to die.
Yeah.
Don't tell government, tell the people. Make it public. People don't know where they can be active even though they want to. And what happens then? They become dejected. And they feel like it doesn't matter what they feel. It doesn't matter that the little anarchist in the back of their brain basement wants to throw Molotov cocktails. They feel that they have no power. Instead of being told, you can go here, here, and here. Those organizations have offices here, here, and here, and websites here, here, and here. You can talk to him, her, and this is what you can do. I feel that this is a big PR issue as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We still have closing remarks here from the panel. Yeah. 2 minutes. You can sit down, relax, Frederico. I know you're hungry. It's good. Okay. So, just very briefly to my three panelists, a quick last comments, things that make you think from the discussions, anything you still want to pick up, and we'll start with Ethne.
I wasn't going to make any closing remarks, but your passion definitely made your comment my favorite of the day. And I think you reassured me that I'm in the right place with this current role because I share your passion for that so deeply. And the place that you should start finding that is with Civics 264, which should be doing a better job at promoting through good PR and communication strategies the work of CSOs. So I'll give you my card later, and we're new, but well, we're not new, we've been doing it for a while, but we'll be re-amping up those efforts. So thank you for that.
Well, no, I just actually want to echo what Ronnie said. Basically, it's the time for us to be proactive. There are now some opportunities with documents like NDP6 and hopefully an agreed partnership policy. Yes, we do need to also deal with some of the negativity around, but we could probably do that at the moment by ourselves being very positive and proactive.
Thank you.
Yes. No, for me, really, it's just a thing about it is very clear that as CSOs, we must do a better job at branching out, organizing ourselves, and then putting out the word out there and fighting for the interests of our people. Very clear. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for the room. Very passionate room indeed.
Thank you very much to all of you, and I just quickly want to emphasize what Ronnie said on if we work together between government, civil society, and even business, we get to better results, and that there is tension in there, it's healthy and democratic, and we can deal with that. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.